5, 4, 3. Action.
So welcome everybody to this conference. This is a hybrid conference. There are some panelists joining me here from Pristina. We're in Swiss Diamond Hotel in the conference room, and we will have more panelists joining us virtually via Zoom. We'll have 30 minutes for every panel. We have 2 panels and 15 minutes after each panel for questions that hopefully will be asked to us in the next 1.5 hours. My name is Franziska Cindale. I'm a journalist with a focus on the Western Balkans. And the topic we will address today, which is free movement in the region, is I've been dealing with that for the last 6 years. Basically, the first time I came to Kosovo, when already this was a big topic, especially for young people. And unfortunately, 6 years later, nothing much has changed in this regard. I will now give the floor to Astrid Istrefi for his opening keynote. Thank you.
Thank you, Franziska. Thanks very much. It's a great privilege for me and for my colleagues at the Balkan Forum to have distinguished speakers participate and share their views on the freedom of movement of people in the Western Balkans and throughout the Schengen area. They are politicians, they are diplomats, they are civil society activists who are working every day, very proactively in addressing the serious challenges that affect the people in the Western Balkans and the EU. Francesca will say a couple of words later on about the speakers, and we'll have their insights into how these challenges can be addressed to remove the obstacles for people to move freely across the Western Balkans and in the Schengen area. I think if there was any doubt that until recently, who is responsible for the obstacles to the freedom of movement, there is no doubt anymore. It's the leaders in the Western Balkans who have the responsibility, who are accountable to citizens, and who have to do whatever they can to enable freedom of movement of people. At the same time, in the case of Kosovo, it's the EU who is responsible to make sure that is fulfilling and deliver on the promises and not undermine its credibility. And in the Western Balkans, choice grasp less so in terms of the country. I think we have to remind it's an indication that tensions can easily escalate, and then those may have even severe consequences that may lead to violent conflict. At the same time, I think we have to remind ourselves that we are dealing with a region that is still not stable. If the stabilitocracy is something that whoever is thinking of using for their political capital or the future of the country, then I don't think that will be something that can last forever. So the choices on the side of citizens to make sure that they are exercising the power that they have in electing their representatives and governments, but also holding them to account. And the question is also whether people should only vote and then wait for 4 years or as much as it takes for a government to be in place until the next elections come, or whether they should be actively engaging in public issues for the common good, or even the political issues that either make this region a more prosperous or that it undermines their future. there is plenty of evidence that shows that people are not confident that the Western Balkans are going to make any profound changes so that there are better prospects for people in the region. So thank you very much, and I leave the word now with the guests who we have here as speakers who are joining at the venue in Pristina and those who are joining from Western Balkans and EU. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will start with those panelists who are present. I would like to start with you, Mrs. Citaku. You were serving as an ambassador of Kosovo to the United States until recently, I think until March, since 2015. And I remember there were governments coming and going in Kosovo, but basically what all prime ministers had in common is that they were promising or at least pressuring also the EU on guaranteeing Kosovo visa liberalization. It's the only country in Europe that cannot, or whose citizens cannot travel visa-free to the Schengen area. So I would like to ask you two questions. What is the standpoint on the US on that, if there is any? And the second one, after 6 years, things not changing, does Kosovo lack diplomacy on this issue?
Thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you today and with my old friend, Dukagjin Gorani. Well, before I answer your question, before I was an ambassador to the United States, I was the Minister for European Integrations. And I remember very vividly June 14th, 2012, when we received the visa roadmap for Kosovo. I was in Brussels together with the delegation. And if someone would have told me that day that in September 2021, I would be still speaking about visa liberalization for Kosovo, I would have called you crazy, because it was a contract. We were given 101 criteria, twice as many as for the rest of the countries in the Western Balkans. We worked very hard to meet every single one of them. And it was in 2016 that European Commission finally recommended visa liberalization for Kosovo, highlighting very clearly that Kosovo has already met all of the criteria on the roadmap. Unfortunately, for Kosovo continues to have a very platonic relationship with the European Union and with the Schengen zone. Our citizens are not the only ones in Europe who cannot travel visa-free. Well, we're not only citizens from Colombia and Venezuela to Taiwan and everyone else in between can travel to Schengen zone visa-free. 1.8 million Kosovars cannot. This is, it's shameful. It's shameful for European Union itself, because this was a contract. This is a contract they violated. What I've seen from my time as a minister of EU, many in Brussels, but also in the capitals around European Union, view enlargement as an altruistic project, as a favor they're doing to these poor Balkan countries. Actually, it's mutual. It is mutually beneficiary project. How can EU be taken seriously on issues far more distant and more complex if they fail to deliver in a territory that's within their boundaries? And I'm not talking only about Kosovo here. Look at North Macedonia, look at Albania. Both have met the criteria required for opening the accession talks. Nothing has moved. On US, well, there is a very consistent and cohesive bipartisan view on the Western Balkans and on the future of the Western Balkans. They believe that Europe whole and can be a whole and fully completed as a project only when all of the Western Balkan countries are integrated into the European Union. Unfortunately, from what I can see, full integration is almost dead. We don't hear anyone speaking about membership of the Western Balkan countries in the EU anymore. They're trying to rethink, redesign a new way forward. But freedom of movement is a basic, fundamental human right. And unfortunately, EU has failed to deliver.
So I would like to turn to a panelist that is virtually with us, Mrs. Viola von Cramon. She is a standing rapporteur for Kosovo from the Greens in the European Parliament. Mrs. Cramon, maybe you're willing to address the elephant in the room. The EU Commission gave green light for Kosovo's visa liberalization, so did the EU Parliament several times. It's about the member states, but what member states are we talking about and what are their motives?
Well, thank you, Franziska. Thanks to everyone who host this great panel with a distinguished guest here today, and thanks for having me. Well, of course, I mean, I'm the biggest defender of this overdue visa liberalization for Kosovo, for the young generation in the Balkans.
We have to start again because for whatever reason we cannot hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But we will have it fixed soon.
All right.
Just give me a second.
I can try.
Now we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. Now
I'm just sorry that you have to start again.
All right. Okay. I will be brief. Thank you, Franziska. Thanks to everyone. Thanks for hosting this great debate here with the distinguished speakers. That's true. I'm the biggest defender of visa liberalization for Kosovo, and especially for the young generation, as the ambassador has portrayed it. I mean, this is absolutely unfair. And we in the European Parliament, as you have mentioned, Franziska, have many times supported and have given green lights to visa liberalization. But of course, the Council, for whatever reason, especially in that respect, it is France, sometimes the Netherlands, sometimes even Sweden, I have heard, are not so much in favor. This is extremely puzzling. That irritates a lot, while of course that resistance is domestically driven. And it's really hard if you base your election campaign, as it obviously happens in France, on the Balkans. And even, I mean, the non-start of the accession talks, as you have rightly put it, in Albania and North Macedonia, obviously linked to this election campaign in France. And that is extremely unfortunate, because President Macron calls himself a geopolitical president. And in that respect, of course, the expectations were high, for good reason, that he would understand how important that region is for all of us in Europe. So we are pushing, we try to have also, due to the bilateral talks, I think the former Cudic government had established bilateral channels to the French ministry, as they had done before with the German ministry. They worked very well. And so they try to convince and to abolish or to remove all major concerns from the French side. We have hoped that with a new methodology where member states have a greater influence and could even not really veto, but of course have a greater saying in the progress, that France would use this, but also be more active. I think that most of the people who finally come to Kosovo, finally see the region, talk to the people, they have, let's say, a much differentiated opinion and can make some progress also in the capitals. So, of course, our hope is that we at some point, hopefully then after the election in France next year, we will see that that progress. But honestly, I am as frustrated as the ambassador and as you, Franziska. So I would be very, let's say, realistic what we can see and what we can hope for. But obviously, the majority in the French society is not, let's say, sensitive enough to this important topic.
So you have mentioned an important word, which is election campaigns and also prejudices. So there is a fear existing, I guess, not only in France, that lifting a visa regime for a very small country would cause illegal migration. This is part of the national narratives in these countries. And we are very glad that we have an expert on this question with us at the panel, Gerald Knaus. He is chairman of the European Stability Initiative. He has published many reports on this question, has been very vocal. And I would like to ask you, Mr. Knaus, if there is a connection between that, lifting visa regimes and so-called illegal migration. Is this a valid argument used in the election campaigns?
Well, first of all, welcome to everyone. Thanks for this opportunity. It's great to, first of all, meet friends again, even if online. And secondly, it's really, really great of the organizers to put this on the agenda. Because I noticed, I mean, some of you might know, ESI has worked on this issue from 2009 when we published the first letter calling on the Commission to prepare a visa liberalization roadmap, which it was not prepared at that time, together with Otto Schily and Giuliano Amato, two former interior ministers. Since 2009, we wrote a lot of papers until 2015. And then basically the issue dropped off our agenda as much as of the agenda of, I think, a lot of European civil society. Why? Because it looked hopeless. And if it looks hopeless, you don't spend your time on it. I mean, this is a very basic principle of human motivation. But it isn't hopeless. And so I'm really glad that your event, we've been continuing to do research, and I can tell you a little bit of how we think hope could be restored. Because let's make this very, very clear. This is a concrete issue. It doesn't matter accession talks with North Macedonia. It doesn't matter prejudices about Albanians. It doesn't matter prejudices about Muslims. Albania has visa-free travel. North Macedonia has visa-free travel. Bosnia-Herzegovina has visa-free travel, and Kosovo hasn't. So the issue is really, how do you move one country with what arguments from the blacklist to the whitelist? Clearly, European interior ministers were ready to move Albania there, we're ready to move Bosnia there, we're ready to move Ukraine there, we're ready to move Moldova and Georgia there, and are reluctant on Kosovo. What is it? Well, it's always useful, and that's why I just tweeted on this, that it's always useful to go back to a classic. Here's a little book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And Dale Carnegie, always useful, really, truly. You know, it's one of these airport books you see and you think, well, what can it possibly teach me? But if you go to chapter 3, what Dale Carnegie writes is, the only way on earth to influence other people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. So in this case, it's already been mentioned, this means, what do the French want? What do the Dutch want? And how can Kosovo help them get it? So it's not very useful to start from the assumption that life is unfair, because it is. But somehow Albania and Bosnia got around this. Now. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Different momentum.
No, please go on.
Well, no. What is different is that the French learned something in the meantime. Do you know how many asylum applications there were in France in 2019? Off the top of your head. If you deal with Kosovo visa liberalization, that's a number you must know. It's double the number of 2015. So 2015 was the big year of European refugee crisis, allegedly, right? Large number of people coming into Europe. Well, in 2015, France had 76,000 asylum applications. 2019, 4 years later, very much fewer refugees reach Europe, very much fewer irregular migration, and France has 151,000 asylum applications, double. So for President Macron, who sits there and who's promised to reduce irregular migrations, this is a complete failure, which the opposition is using. We already hear, of course, from the far right, but we also hear it from conservatives like Michel Barnier. Now, France has doubled number of asylum applications. That's a problem. But there's a second problem, is who applies for asylum in France? If you go back to the last year before Corona, which is representative, the second nation applying for asylum in France was Albania. And everybody I met in the Ministry of Interior in France will bring up Albania. They will not really talk about Kosovo. They will talk about Albania, right? So they will say, we can't risk that. We already have double the number of asylum applications. 10,000 Albanians applied for asylum. If we get another 10,000 Kosovars to do the same, which is what they fear, then the opposition will rip us apart and say we are irresponsible and we haven't learned our lesson. So the question then is, for Kosovo, what can you say to the French? What do you need to tell French parliamentarians? What do you need to tell the French Minister of Interior or the French journalists? Where are they wrong? They are not wrong on the problem. They are wrong on where the problem lies. The problem does not lie in Kosovo. It lies in France. France has an asylum system that takes a very long time to determine claims. At the same time, it is very generous. Both are good things in themselves. But it means that France has become the country in Europe where those who got visa-free travel, and it's not just Albanians, the third nation in 2019 applying for asylum in France was Georgia. So Georgians, Albanians, and others travel legally. It's not illegal migration at all. It's fully legal. They get on a bus or they get on a plane, they fly to France. It's all legal. There are no smugglers. There's no crime. They go into a French asylum system office and say, I want to apply for asylum. Then, well, should we say this in public, they might get a few €100 each month cash support for an asylum procedure that can take a very long time. Everything is legal. They are not doing anything wrong. This is the French system. But the result is that whereas the number of Kosovars who apply for asylum in Germany has fallen sharply, same is true for all the other Western Balkan nations. The number of Western Balkan nationals applying for asylum in France has gone up. So the problem then is in France, right? The challenge is, how can the French change this? And here, Kosovar negotiators, together with their European friends, need to make proposals, because France should change this in its own interest and in the interest of Albania. Because the French politicians say they are blocking Albanian accession talks. Macron said it in a speech very openly. He said, how can we open accession talks with a country where there are many people applying for asylum? Well, but it's not the fault of Albania. It's the fault of the French system, right?
So,
okay.
Mr. Knaus, we will go now to these proposals, and I will try to get Mr. Gorani as a panelist in this. So, how to win friends in France? You've been advising Mr. Facci as a prime minister, then he was president. If you would advise now the current acting prime minister, Mr. Cudic, what would you tell him when it comes to tackling this on European level?
Well, now that we have been discussing the elephant in the room, but the elephant has not yet been properly defined. What I would advise is to conclude the political process. I would not go on beating around the bush. This has nothing to do with immigration policies or refugees. This fall, 2021, marks the 30th anniversary of visa regime for this region and for my generation. It has been exactly autumn of 1991 when we were imposed visas. And my generation has spent 30 years just to get a glimpse of a notion of what it means, free movement and free travel. At its outset, this whole issue was presented as technical. It was about benchmarking and about certain standards, technical standards to be met. And then once they were met, we have encountered a radio silence from Brussels, which still persists. And I understand why, because the visa lifting procedure has to remain technical. But the fact is that in case of Kosovo, we have a political confrontation and a political issue that hampers and impedes the possibility of getting individual EU states to agree on lifting the visas. Now, I don't have a problem with the fact that for as long as there is an ongoing and open issue with the Republic of Serbia, there will be no possibility for free movement for Kosovo citizens. I try to understand Brussels and individual member states. What I do not understand, and I consider that to be a rather indecent, to be more precise, from the side of Brussels, is that this truth is not being told to Kosovo public. The truth that the visa lifting procedure is entirely conditioned by the outcome of the political process and the dialogue with Belgrade. And while this truth is not being openly articulated and openly interpreted to Kosovo actors, these two problems will persist. A dialogue would protract and prolong indefinitely, and the agonizing isolation will continue. What I know for a fact is that on few occasions, it was exactly Le Président Macron who have warned our prime ministers that unless there is a successful conclusion of the dialogue, France can do nothing about visas. And there have been occasions when also individual states like Holland, including Sweden, have been raising the issue of properly concluding the process so that the region can take on a path of stability and political predictability. So my question for the panel is, if a political issue, purely political issue, such as the process with Serbia, is hampering the process, and it's not a technical one, why is this not being explained and articulated out loud and unequivocally to the political actors? Because in general, there is a common belief in Kosovo that visa lifting is not related to political issue, that visa lifting is, for some reason, a technical issue because we have been told so. And while the technical conditions and benchmarks have been met, then there has to be something, shall we say, irrational in place, which starts from the cultural incompatibility or religious xenophobia, all the way to some sort of a perhaps personal vendetta towards Kosovars, which of course I do not believe. What I do believe is that this truth has to be told boldly and properly. Dialogue has to be concluded so that we get visa lifted.
Anyhow, Mrs. Citaku, you already mentioned that Kosovo had to fulfill more criteria, double as much, but can the visa question actually be part of the dialogue when it was not with the other Western Balkan countries at all?
Well, first of all, I want to quickly respond to Mr. Knaus. Because EU had learned its lessons from the previous visa liberalization processes, we had twice as many criteria. Furthermore, in order to receive the roadmap, we had to work together with the European Commission on the platform for the reintegration of repatriated persons. We had unilaterally adopted the law for the reintegration of repatriated persons. We have individually with member states signed agreements to shorten the procedure for asylum seekers for Kosovo. So no, there's absolutely, in terms of criteria to be met, there's nothing Kosovo can do. In terms of communicating to the respective audiences in the member states, there's nothing Kosovo can do. We've done everything that could have been done. We've done everything that was in our hands. Asylum seekers from Kosovo are not in the top list of asylum seekers, neither in the European Union overall, nor in France. I don't think people in Paris stay up at night worrying whether Kosovo has a visa-free regime or not. And unfortunately, back then, when I received the roadmap, I was less cynical. I was probably more naive than I am now. But today, I can see it very clearly. It's not a technical process. It's purely a political one. The rest of the countries in the Western Balkans did not have the same problems we had with Serbia. And unfortunately, since EU has no other carrots for Kosovo other than visa-free regime, because of lack of unity within member states on the final status of Kosovo, visa liberalization is the only carrot they have, and it's a carrot. Obviously, they're saving when we have the final agreement with Serbia. It's unfortunate. It shouldn't be like this, but as Knaus said, life is not fair.
So people in Paris probably don't stay up at night and worrying about
No.
this, but what we are sure, and that leads me to our second panel, is that people in Kosovo and also in Bosnia, they stay up at night worrying about whether they can do their scholarship grant, whether they can attend the wedding of a relative in the Schengen area. And thank you very much for this first panel. I see we don't have any questions yet, but we can take them later. And now I would like to welcome our second panel, which will focus on how does this actually affect people living in the region.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll have to change seats.
Shall we?
So thanks. Welcome to the second panel. We talked a lot about political motivation, motives, election campaigns, European Union. What we didn't talk about yet is how does these visa regimes actually affect people, especially young people living in the Western Balkans. And we're not talking about Kosovo today only. We're also talking about Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we're also talking about Serbia. But again, I would like to start with Pristina. Egzona Bokshi, you are a student, 27. You just got a scholarship for university in Belgium. You did your bachelor in Pristina, now working for UN Women. And your master's starts in 2 days in Belgium, but you will not be able to be there. Can you explain us why?
First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for Balkan Forum addressing this important topic, and not just topic, but issue which the citizens of Kosovo are facing. Well, the short answer to your question is visa. So as you said, in early this year, I got an email about my master's, and my master's will start in 2 days, but as you said, I will not be able to actually attend and go and start my master's because of the visa process. But this is not just my problem and my issue. The citizens of Kosovo face these problems for a really long time, and I was hearing other panelists what they were saying and their remarks about this. And usually what during in these panels or in these discussions, every time they would ask young people a perspective, somehow we tend to come with a more positive approach.
I think we have to tackle a technical question. You know, that's this thing with hybrid conferences, nobody is used to them.
Okay,
and
so am I good now?
It's weird for everyone that not everyone can just speak with each other normally.
Yeah, exactly.
Can we go on? Should we repeat something again? We'll have the time for that.
Okay, I can repeat myself shortly.
Shortly, you can repeat yourself what your case is about.
Exactly. So as you said, I got my scholarship. In 2 days, my scholarship will start. I will not be able to attend
in Belgium
physically because of the visa issue. Because getting the visa, I would first need to travel to Sofia and then to get my visa for Belgium. But
and why is Sofia? How does this come into the story?
Well, because as Kosovo citizens, we have to get my student visa, I need to travel to Sofia first to get my student visa and then travel to Belgium. But since we cannot travel since I cannot even travel to Sofia without a visa, I need actually a visa to get a visa. So this is the short story. But usually in these conferences, in these panel discussions, when I am asked as a young citizen from Kosovo, somehow I have the feeling that people are waiting for me to be more positive and be more hopeful about this. But actually, for this topic and this issue, other panelists said that they are frustrated and they are angry and this whole process is shameful. But for me, everything is double, because you from the beginning, you see how unequal you are to other young people in the region. If you would check all the surveys, all the data, the citizens of Kosovo are usually the citizens most pro-EU programs, more pro-EU language, more pro-EU narratives, but then you have exactly these citizens who are not able to travel to EU. So this is extremely frustrating. And within my process of getting a visa, which is still going on, I actually came to a point when I said, okay, maybe I should just decline my scholarship, because there is a huge bureaucracy that we have to go through in order just to be there.
And will you have to decline it, or can you keep it?
No, I will not, because this would mean that I gave up, and I will not. It's funny because my scholarship, it is funded. It's an Erasmus Mundus scholarship, so it is funded by European Commission.
That gave green light to visa liberalization of Kosovo.
Well, yeah, but then because of that, it's so this is a really, I don't know, it's a really frustrating issue for us. It's a process which we have to go every time that we want to travel somewhere. So.
And not only in Kosovo, which would lead me to you, Samir. You're a research officer of the Balkan Forum. You're traveling a lot in the region, every weekend, kind of on the run, to one panel to the other. Can you give us a little bit of an insight as a citizen of Bosnia-Herzegovina? What do you have to go through to visit Egzona in Pristina?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, thanks for excellent questions. And also, I really enjoyed the first panel. What do we have to go through? I mean, first of all, as a Bosnian citizen, we do have a process which is, to be honest, not as tough as with my Kosovo peers. So when it comes to Bosnia and Herzegovina, there is a visa regime that exists between Bosnia and Kosovo. And in order to apply for a visa, as I did now for this very conference, I had to apply for a visa of Kosovo in Skopje. So I had to travel to another country, to another city, to the embassy of Kosovo in Skopje, because Bosnia and Herzegovina, formally speaking, does not recognize Kosovo. Therefore, there is no embassy of Kosovo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Why is this hard? Because first and foremost, it's a costly process. It's time consuming. It's a process that demands action, it demands, certain planning, time planning when it comes to organizing such events, because we need to apply at least 1 to 2 months ahead, which then discourages people to apply. In a lot of cases, conferences are not organized, 1 to 2 months in advance. So in this case, the Embassy of Kosovo in Skopje was quite cooperative, and they did issue a visa on time. However, I cannot compare myself to my colleagues, friends from Kosovo who really have tough time, not just traveling to Bosnia, but also traveling exactly to the EU. For the EU, I don't need to go to any embassy. As we have heard now, Egzona needs a visa to get a visa to study, in Belgium, which is abhorrent, it's unacceptable, it's immoral from the EU, and at the end of the day, it's violating the core principles of the EU, the principles of the freedom of movement, and the EU is in this case, basically isolating the people that they need as allies. Those are young people, progressive people, people who cherish universal values, people like Egzona, those who want to study abroad, collect skills, knowledge, and return back to Kosovo, and in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, to become future pillars of Kosovo society, and to get in dialogue with the EU.
We would like to get now a bit into the discussion. Our virtual panelists. We talked about traveling even within the region is difficult. Like 30 years after the dissolvement of Yugoslavia, this is a matter. So I would like to ask Andjela Micanovic. There is a kind of a idea existing among young people, also from Balkan Forum, to establish something that is called Erasmus+. Can you explain us what this would mean for the region?
You can hear me now, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you for having me. It is my pleasure to be speaking before you today on behalf of the Western Balkans Alumni Association. This is an association that gathers people from the Western Balkans region. Some of them have gone through this whole process of applying for Erasmus+ scholarships. And this is the group of people who also worked in the EU or EU partner countries. To sum it up, we are people who were lucky enough to seize life-changing opportunities and enrich ourselves with new knowledge professional experience, and friendships for life. It is sad to hear how people and peers from our region are struggling to seize these opportunities, not only in the region, but also in Europe. All political scientists, though, and I really enjoy analyzing trends and processing leading to political decisions. When I was thinking about this conference, I just decided not to talk about politics today because there is a lot to be said and probably there are some things that we wouldn't agree on. But I wish to talk to you today about people and how some politically driven decisions affect our way of living and attitudes toward each other. So going back to your question, how does this whole process also affects the region and why is visa liberalization needed for all of us? I would like to share 3 interconnected reasons advocating in favor of visa liberalization today. So the first one relates to this impact of visa liberalization that we will be able to do this short-term travel to the regional countries. And why does this matter? Best stories of my life that I can tell you about can indeed be found between pages of my passport. And I am sure that most of you can agree with me here, because every trip was not only a chance to walk different streets or explore different cities that we were visiting, but it had a rather deep and long-term effect on my way of thinking and the idea about people and life. Because traveling keeps our eyes wide open and somehow it changes us for better. And what this region needs is a real reconciliation, which is not possible without unhindered mobility. So bearing in mind these political trends in the region and issues in democracy building, our history and fragile yet dynamic relationship between different ethnic and religious groups, we really need to overcome challenges and differences in a way that we are given opportunities to meet and get to know each other. So this is the first reason why it is really unfortunate that we cannot travel, that Egzona cannot visit Samir in Bosnia and Herzegovina and vice versa, for example. So we need to work on this a bit further, because while our governments keep on promising that they will promote peace and cooperation, we are witnessing growing tensions and living in a region divided in so many different ways. So secondly, the second reason that I would share with you today why I would advocate for visa liberalization, and I think so should you, is that mobility without limits within the region of Western Balkans is important for education experience sharing. It's not only important in relationship with the EU through the Erasmus Plus program that you mentioned, but it's very, very important to do this within our region. Because this way we are going to improve prospects for future regional collaboration and eventually European integration. But to make a real progress in the reform process, in resolving outstanding bilateral and internal issues which we have, and in achieving reconciliation within and between the societies in the region, we need to make it possible for our citizens to collaborate. So not only for Egzona, for instance, to go to Brussels, if I heard well, but for her to go to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and for us from other countries such as Bosnia and Herzegovina to go and visit her. As a national of Montenegro, fortunately, I've never been denied entry to any country I wish to travel to, from Europe through the Americas to Asia, let alone to a country from my region. However, sadly, my peers, as you can hear from the region, are facing these challenges. And as I was growing up, I started to get to know or learn about stories of people, for instance, from Kosovo, who got married to a person from Bosnia and Herzegovina and could not bring their families to share their joy. I used to meet young people who wished to collaborate in different projects and jointly contribute to the development of this region. However, if the event was held in Kosovo, it was a quite long and difficult process, as you could hear from Samir, for them to get there. And the most striking example that I would like to share with you today was the story of one girl from Kosovo who was traveling with my sister across the Balkans through one program where the idea was to take young people in a bus through the region and help them to get to know each other and get to know the culture of different countries from the Western Balkans region. When she was at the Bosnian border, she was denied entry, not because she did something wrong, but because of her national identity. And such restrictions limit our development and, if you wish, create traumas which reflect to all other aspects of our lives and attitudes toward all people, for instance, of Bosnia and Herzegovina in this particular case. Most probably she will never wish to come back. And it's certainly something we don't want to do. And finally, the third reason, and I will be very quick because I know there are other people willing to share their opinion and stories. In my opinion, one of the main impacts of visa liberalization relate to the facilitation of access to the labor market. While our governments are working towards a single market, we are still facing challenges in our mutual understanding and acceptance. If the Western Balkans stands to change negative trends in emigration, the substantial work must be done to facilitate the labor mobility within the region. So the Western Balkan countries are, while we are lagging behind EU countries in many aspects, and at the same time we wish to progress, then we need to share knowledge and experience and find a way to borrow our human capital to one another rather than to the rest of the world. So to conclude and leave time for others to speak, I would just like to tell you that I'm very happy that I'm here today, and I stand here today in order to call for understanding and diminishing of borders of any kind, hoping for political stability, peace, and prosperous European future for us. So it's really what this region needs.
Thank you very much. Andjela, you are from Montenegro, and now we're going to turn to another country we haven't spoken about yet. It's Serbia. I would like to virtually connect with Ivan Djuric and ask you something that Andjela already mentioned. It's reconciliation. Two questions to you. What are the traveling barriers existing between Kosovo and Serbia still? And why does the, let's say, problems with traveling, why does it harm reconciliations between both countries in order to generations meeting each other, young people actually meeting each other in person?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you, and also thank you for including this particular topic into this broader discussion on mobility, because it is important. Regarding barriers between Serbia and Kosovo, from today we have another one, right? If you see in the news that the so-called reciprocity has been established, and now the license plates from Serbia are not legal in Kosovo, which is a step back, a big step back after 10 years of this agreement of freedom of movement between Serbia and Kosovo. We haven't been able to make a significant step forward. We have been able to just to take a step back. If you remember, for years we speak about possible plane line between Belgrade and Pristina, opening new border crossings. But what have the two governments, two countries managed to do in the last 10 years? Even not to fulfill one of the first agreements. This particular issue is not that big for a young person who wants to travel to Kosovo. €5 is something that everyone can afford if he is already or she is already traveling. But consider the motivation for this, and vice versa. I don't mean to blame everything on Kosovo government, of course. Vice versa, if you want to travel to Serbia and you know that you have a completely different procedure than every other country, that you get some new ID on a piece of paper, etc., etc. Is that normal? No, it's not. For frequent travelers, it's not an issue. It's not a problem. But it is extremely discouraging for people who are traveling for the first time. And of course, each one of these measures, like this valid from today, is fueled then by the nationalist propaganda on both sides, and even more discouraging people to travel. We have organized exchange programs between Serbia and Kosovo for almost 20 years now, and you can see how each one of these events who fuels these nationalistic tensions, which present any kind of possibility of danger, how much it decreases the demand for traveling for the first time to Pristina or to Belgrade, because instead of negotiating with one another, I mean Serbia and Kosovo, they're not negotiating now with one another. They are negotiating against each other. And this bigger and bigger division, this sense of instability, this sense of insecurity, it's people are feeling that. Young people are feeling that as well. And the demand, the desire of young people to travel through the region is decreasing. Every time there is a story that a car or a bus with plates from is attacked in the other country, every time that is blown out of the proportion. One incident during the summer season and one incident during the winter holiday season, it's blown out of the proportion in order to prove that idiotic point that it's not safe and it's not good for people to travel to the neighboring country. This is not, like Andjela said, this is not a road to reconciliation if we stay within our closed groups and closed societies, in order to have a societal reconciliation, not the one which two prime ministers or presidents will sign, but the two societies establish connections and reconciliation. They need to meet, they need to travel, they need to work together. This is something that the politics should provide basis for. I'm afraid instead they are doing completely the opposite.
Thank you very much, Ivan. We already have a question in the chat, but we'll wait another 15 minutes to answer it because we have a last panelist virtually who didn't speak yet. Blazhen, Maleski, welcome. Coming from North Macedonia. You're working for the Regional Youth Cooperation Office, RYCO, which is an outcome of the Berlin process. Can you share with us some challenges you face when bringing together young people from the region and what you would need politically in the next, let's be optimistic, in the next 12 months, and if you expect anything to come? So we have, we still have a problem to hear you. It's the same like with Egzona, but we will fix it very soon. Again,
okay.
Hybrid conferences are not fun. For those
yeah, and I'm not that far away.
Now you can speak, I think. We will hear you.
Now? Can you hear me?
Great.
Perfect. So first of all, thank you very much to the organizers for bringing up this topic. Because as you already mentioned, even for RYCO, it's difficult to organize and give, although RYCO is giving the necessary tools to organize such gatherings of young people, it's really difficult when you have visas in place, and the administration barrier for organizing such events is huge, especially when you count in Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina. If you have organizations who have gotten money from RYCO to organize such events. I think it's really difficult to say what we need from. I mean, Gerald from the previous panel would say it's not very difficult to know what you need from the politicians, but it's a little bit difficult to understand the political context of RYCO. So, as a youth representative of North Macedonia, I have a special kind of role in the governing board where my colleagues from the other 5 Western Balkan countries are also sitting with me, but also the ministries for youth and generally sports as they combine them. So we always have this open discussion on what can be better, but we have to take in account that even the initiative to have the Regional Cooperation Office for youth in the Western Balkans was a huge step, and a political step by all governments from the Western Balkan 6 in order to bring young people closer together. And I think it's a little bit kind of a stupid situation when you have on the one side the political will to finance and to establish such an organization, but on the other hand, make it as difficult as possible for young people to actually meet, in the sense of having visas and bureaucratic stuff that you have to go through if you want to meet people if you're from Kosovo and want to meet people from Bosnia and vice versa. So in essence, it's a difficult situation because on the one hand, there is political will for young people to cooperate. On the other hand, they make it as difficult as possible. And I think we as young people, and especially the youth representatives, who I think all agree with me, is that we have to lift such restrictions for young people, because in essence, you're sending a wrong message to young people. Not only because it's extremely difficult to get a visa, but because it creates this narrative that you actually shouldn't go, that you're not welcome. And this is something I think that government should think about. I don't think that the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina wants to say you're not welcome to Kosovo youngsters. And this is something that has to change in order for us as RICO to be even more effective and to bring as many young people from all of the Western Balkan states together and get them a chance to actually get to know each other. But this is also extremely difficult because also in the previous panel, it was noted that politics play a huge role in such decisive steps in having a no visa regime towards a country. That means actually recognizing, for instance, the country that exists when it comes for Bosnia. But I think it is manageable for politicians to actually put in place procedures so that everybody can get the opportunity to meet each other. But I don't think this plays into the hands of, as I would like to call them, ethnic entrepreneur politicians who are basically constantly playing the card of the bad villains in different countries. And it's this, and the lifting of visas would actually only play against their cards in constantly playing the ethnic entrepreneur politicians card and saying, oh, the Kosovars are bad, that's why we have visas, and we don't actually want to give you the chance to meet them because you might like them, even though we're constantly using the bad words as such. So I think in essence, what we need to do is send out a strong message as young people that will not be influenced by such messages from politicians. And that, I think Astrid said it in the beginning, we should hold politicians accountable who constantly win elections on these cards and say, look, it's really easy to meet people either in Kosovo, either in Bosnia, either in Serbia or Montenegro, or in Albania. It's very easy to get to know them. They're not very different than we are. And they have their own views and they have their own opinions about stuff, but you have to give us the chance to actually meet each other and not make it as complicated as possible for us to actually meet. The second thing that we have to ask politicians is to give a strong message that young people in the region deserve much better than what they're getting at the moment, especially also from every country specifically, but also from the region. And I think people are seeking asylum in Germany, France, and such because the infrastructure and because the facilities for young people in this region and the opportunities that they get are not on the same level. And I think here, all of the Western Balkan 6 governments have to cooperate together on raising the standard for the opportunities of young people and giving them the opportunity to become the best that they want to be and giving them the opportunities that they necessarily need for getting better in whatever they want to do. And the third part is also asking politicians to not constantly use the specific bilateral issues that they have between each other on every possible initiative that they can imagine in the Western Balkans, in the sense of that the youth representative of Serbia can freely go to Pristina to a meeting and meet us, the colleagues of RICO, and discuss the next steps of how youth cooperation should be funded in the region. So I think these are the 3 pillars that we have to have as kind of our regional youth manifesto in order to push politicians in the right way and give us the right opportunities to actually meet and get to know each other face to face. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. We already have a question. We'll tackle it in 7 minutes. But basically, my last question would be to you, Samir, because we talked a lot about Kosovo so far. We talked a lot about existing problems, and we saw how hard it is even for diplomats to find an answer to that. So I would like to ask you about an initiative that failed recently, and I think you are the right one to give very precise details about why. Why does it fail that young people in general, people from the region, can just travel in the region with an ID, with an ID, not a passport, an ID? This was an idea, it failed, and
this good initiative actually launched by the Regional Cooperation Council. They actually gathered together, formed working groups within the region, 6 working groups working on a document that would have enabled citizens of the Western Balkans to travel throughout the region freely without passports, without visas, only with their IDs. Everything was running smooth, and the document should have been signed at the past Berlin process conference that was held like a month and a half ago, exactly in Berlin, in Germany. And unfortunately, due to what we were told back then, due to some cosmetic mistakes in the agreement, mostly related to how Kosovo was addressed, with star or without star, in the document, Kosovo and Serbia pulled out and did not continue to sign the agreement. However, I'm really positive and confident that this kind of diplomatic process and the efforts by the RCC will have a positive effect. So hopefully, at one of the next Berlin process conferences, summits, we will have this document signed, which would, at the end of the day, mean that Bosnia and Kosovo would mutually abolish their own visa regime by signing this regional agreement that would enable citizens of the region, to travel without any kind of obstacles, any kind of, limitations, where in that sense, freedom of movement of people would not be hampered by documents, by visas, etc. And that's something that should have been signed a long time ago, because young people of the region, young Bosnians, young Kosovars, are actually, future of they're present, they're also future of the region. And without united young people in the region, we cannot speak also about united region as such. And therefore, bringing young people together, to exchange, to circulate throughout the region does not only, contribute to them meeting each other, it also contributes to brain circulation that we need really to address and to recognize as something very, very highly important for the region. It would contribute to reconciliation process in the region, to development processes in the region. And therefore, I really am positive. I'm hoping that this agreement will be signed at in the upcoming months.
Thanks for this detail. So basically, to wrap it up, this initiative, which would have meant that you can visit friends in Pristina just with your ID, failed because of Kosovo status and whether the star is on it or not. Whereas before we've heard that Kosovo's visa regime with the EU, well, it fails basically because of national rhetorics in EU member states, but of course also because of the unsolved issue between Kosovo and Serbia. And now we have a very interesting question, and I think we'll have another 15 minutes to answer it, and I think all of you will have a lot to say about it, so I will briefly put it. And I will start with you, Egzona. The question is, if all of that we've talked about now for 1 hour and 15 minutes actually leads to the EU losing trust, well, this is a bit obvious, but maybe you can give us some personal views on that. If you talk to friends from Kosovo, how does the image of the EU has changed due to this?
Well, as I said as I said before, if you check the surveys, if you check the researches and all the numbers, Kosovo's citizens, especially young people, are quite positive when it comes to the narratives of EU. What I am afraid that it can happen is that exactly these citizens, Kosovo citizens, cannot endure another failure in a basic human right, which is freedom of movement. I think we cannot, because we talked about the fact that I will not be able to get my visa and start my master's maybe in the day when they start. But exactly stories like mine are hundreds of stories out there in Kosovo where actually young people are giving up their job, their scholarship, I don't know, their opportunities, they're giving up because of this. So I don't think if this process will be prolonged, of course, the situation on the ground will change. So that's why we cannot, as I said, we cannot go through another failure on something which is freedom of movement, especially in Europe. So we are asking about a global Europe. We are talking about all these initiatives and bringing the Western Balkans closer. But my question is, are we really doing that? Because when it comes to Kosovo citizens, somehow I feel that we are not. And I know that maybe I don't know, it's not a big issue to just go and apply for a visa, but it is. Even if you want to go for, I don't know, we were together with Summit in a conference together. Just if you want to go in that conference, regard all the process, because maybe at the end you'll get a positive answer. The cost, the time, the financial cost that it is in this process that young people in Kosovo need to pay, for me, it's ridiculous and it's beyond frustrating.
And what about those who are, who are not privileged to work for the UN, a EU institution, a think tank, whatever? What about those that are maybe don't have a job because they're 18 or they're working as a waiter and they want to go to a wedding abroad? Are their chances lower to get this?
Of course, their chances are low because the process, it depends what type of visa you want to apply. I don't want to go into the details now, but of course it's harder because there is a bureaucracy that you need to respect. And of course, if you don't have a job, if you are not enrolled in any, I don't know, in university or something like that, your chances to get a negative answer are higher. I have friends who actually lost their scholarship because they couldn't have a visa. So it's really a process that it's a huge obstacle for young people, but not just young people, for the citizens of Kosovo.
So maybe very briefly for our virtual participants. There's no other question here in the chat. Maybe there's some more coming. Maybe you, Andjela, but very, very briefly, maybe for less than 1 minute. Do people in Montenegro actually know about these struggles people from Bosnia, but also from Kosovo face? Is that something everyone knows? Is that tackled on the media and the political sphere?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I wouldn't say it's really that people here are familiar with these kind of issues that people from the region are tackling with. The thing is that I do agree with Egzona, but there is one thing that I would also like to add. I think that the burden is on us as well, because I do understand on one side the European Union for not, for still asking us for visas before they open the whole market for the free movement of people as well, because we need to put pressure on our governments to solve some very burning issues, such as fighting corruption and original crime, etc. What I would suggest is that maybe the EU tries to find, and especially here within the region, to try to find some ways to foster youth mobility before we do it with every other citizen, because this may be middle ground where we find some, I don't know, language where we understand each other and where we don't disappoint young people, but we leave opportunities to them to grow and to prosper, regardless of political decisions and political maybe instability that we are facing here in the region. I do think that political elites here in our region understand the level of complexity and the risks involved. However, politics works on a different way. So having this in mind, I encourage all of us to just be very active and to understand how our civil engagement is very important, and to do it, to use our rights to vote and to pressure our governments to do some changes in order for all of us to more pro-country.
Thank you. And we have a new question in the chat that is exactly what you just said. How can we as a civil society influence politics? Ivan, speaking from Serbia, do you have an answer to that? Also briefly, because maybe Sami and Egzona can also add something to that. Or if...
Yes, okay.
Yeah, here you are.
Yes, I think that civil society can influence politics, and I think we do all the time. I would also like to quickly refer to the second part of the previous question. Should we trust the EU if it doesn't keep up the promises? No, we shouldn't trust them, but I think that we all should still have in our best interest in heart, say that European Union is a place where we want to be a part of. So even if we don't trust the current member states governments, if they have failed promises, we have to keep up with this pressure. Regarding Serbia, Kosovo, and Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, visa regimes and travel restrictions. People don't know about that even in Serbia or Kosovo or Bosnia. How many people in Kosovo knows about this Bosnia visa regime? They don't care, because majority of people have no relations with that country. Similar in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In order to make change, we have to, this beautiful term that we always use, raise awareness. But to say it in simple words, people need to know, people need to care about these issues that we care about, and this is how we make change.
People need to know, people need to care. Samir, we talked about what to do, except speaking conferences. There's a petition.
Yeah, exactly.
You can introduce.
So for example, NGOs can and we are doing like series of activities. Every individual can do from himself or herself in advocating, raising awareness as well. Currently, the Balkan Forum has publicly announced today, with the conference, publicly announced a new petition that we will send to the heads of states in the region, parliaments in the region, as well as to the European Commission, EU Council. This petition demands from the governments in the Western Balkans, first and foremost from those in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Serbia, but also from the EU to, as we have heard this phrase today a couple of times, to deliver on their promises, to enable the freedom of movement of people within the region, within the EU. In other words, to abolish the existing visa regimes. It calls for Bosnia and Kosovo to abolish their visa regime. It also invites the EU leaders to deliver on their promises, to fulfill their promises, and to allow the citizens of Kosovo visa liberalization. We have heard this in these two panels in numerous occasions, why this is crucial, why it is so important to allow this, because in one moment we will have a situation where people in the Western Balkans do not trust the EU, as it is slowly happening to a certain extent. So I would like to invite you not just to share, not just to sign the petition, which you can find on our social media channels, on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, Instagram, as well as on the Balkan Forum website, but also to share it with your friends, colleagues, other NGOs, to all of those that you do think that they are directly or indirectly impacted by the existing visa regimes, because we are working towards a situation where we will not have borders in the Western Balkans, or when we will have borders, but those borders will not create, you know, obstacles as they pose at this very moment. What we should be looking forward to or striving to are those borders that today exist in the EU.
I think you also mentioned the petition again a bit later. Now we got a very interesting question, and I would like to pass forward it to Blazhen from North Macedonia, working for the Regional Youth Cooperation Office. Actually, it's several questions, but I would sum it up like this. We talked about the negative consequences in the region, but what does the EU actually lose with all of that by not giving these opportunities to the people? What do you think the EU loses with it, especially when you think about North Macedonia, what also is and was affected by individual countries blocking processes?
Yeah, this is the question. What would they lose? They would lose the power to influence future events, possibly in countries when you have the carrot still looming around Kosovo and trying. For instance, this carrot method with the visa liberalization, as the previous panel also mentioned, that the visas will be lifted once the dialogue with Serbia has brought results, which I think is a little bit 90s politics in the Balkans, trying to influence certain decisions that countries make with giving them possible rewards in the future. And I think this is a little bit difficult, especially for young countries such as Kosovo and North Macedonia to fulfill. But I think the EU at the end of the day has nothing to lose. It has only to gain from the current situation, in the sense of it can influence what happens in the future in the region. But if we have everything checked, like previously mentioned, then it means that we have done some progress. But then the EU asks, or certain members of the EU asks itself, where is the influence that we can take over, whether that is in economy or whatever topic it could be. So I think it is only a position of power that certain member states have. In the case of North Macedonia, Bulgaria is blocking the accession talks. So it is kind of showing that you have to do something that is in the interest of that country in order to achieve further progress towards the European Union, which I think is strategically bad for the European Union, because it brings down the hopes that young people, as you mentioned even before, of young people in the region. So, for instance, going back to the question of trust towards the EU, in North Macedonia, we see a decline of trust, especially among young people when it comes to the EU, because of this deadlock situation that we had for the years previous, but also now with the new situation with Bulgaria. And I think in the future, the European Commission will be very cautious in what it guarantees and what it says on the line on the long run, because it had given promises to Kosovo, it had given promises to North Macedonia, but in the end, they couldn't uphold it. So I think this is something that the European Commission will learn from, and hopefully be more active together with the member states, not only as an entity that kind of works somewhere and is somewhere in a bubble. So I think this is also important for the European Commission. And one last thing that, for instance, I would like to add is young people and people from North Macedonia then actually need their passports to travel to any of the Western Balkan 6. We can travel to Kosovo freely with our ID, to Bosnia, to Serbia, to any of the country 6. And I think I shouldn't be in this privileged situation because I'm from North Macedonia and somebody who lives like 25 kilometers away from here on the border with Kosovo doesn't even have the chance to move freely to Europe or to any of the states here in the region with bureaucracy in mind.
Much for this. So we came to an end of this conference. Thank you very much for participating on the panel virtually. Thank you for sending questions. And to sum it up, well, we talked about freedom of movement in the region, which is obviously not the same and the same case for everyone. We saw that people like Egzona has to even took at hold or put at hold a scholarship she got for Belgium. We talked to people like Samir, who explained us that as a citizen of Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's still a thing and a very bureaucratical move to travel to Pristina. We've had high-ranking diplomats on the panel that pointed out that indeed after 6 years, it is the motivation behind this that Kosovo's visa regime is not lifted yet. And we also saw, especially in the second panel, how important for a young generation it is to get the possibility to meet each other, not only on neutral grounds, let's say, but in the region, in Pristina, in Belgrade, or in Sarajevo. Also, in the end, maybe as a last remark, the petition will be found on the website of the Balkan Forum, also on social media. It will be sent to different EU institutions. There was the question if it would also end up in the European Parliament. I guess so. And you can find it online. There's also a link in this chat. I thank you very much for participating, and I wish you a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.